Welcome back to SledgeHammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Now, today I am joined by the beautiful Lisa, also known as Horror Macaroni. Lisa, how you doing today?
Doing so well. How are you today?
I am doing super awesome, and I'm so glad to make this happen because I've been wanting to work with you for a while. We were finally able to make this connection actually happen. But Lisa, before we talk about why you're here, I want the people that don't know you to get a chance to know you real quick. Lisa is a horror fanatic that started sharing her love for horror back in 2020 when her first public 31 for 31 horror movie challenge. That is so awesome. How did that go?
It went great. So when it first started, it was one of those things where I was like, where can I post where like maybe somebody could read a little bit of what I'm like watching? I didn't think much of it. And then it kind of just took off. It took off because I just like started sharing all my collection, everything I was, following and gaining along the way. And it just kind of blew up. And I couldn't even imagine it got to the level it did now.
And it's amazing. It's funny how the littlest things can grow into such a big, beautiful thing, especially in the horror community where I'm not going to say everybody, but 98% of people are so supportive and in it for the right reasons. And you can meet some of the most amazing, beautiful, wonderful people in the horror genre, which is funny because, hey, let's talk about someone getting their head twisted off. But yeah, you're the coolest person I've ever met. That works out.
Oh my God, yes, like to say the least, I have met some of the most amazing people in this community, counting yourself. I mean, you have been so supportive and just like so many people out there who share a love for such a thing and such support of one another. It's been amazing.
I think what it is, and now this could be, again, I want to stress this. Whenever I say things like this, guys, this is just one man's opinion. There was one time in the 90s I was wrong, so it could happen again. But in my opinion, I'm older than you are, and when I was young, back in the day, it wasn't cool to be a horror fan. Pre 1996, it was not cool to be a horror fan anytime other than October, and we felt that awkwardness, and now we have this ability to find the other awkward people that were not so cool as us when we were younger, and I think this is where the horror community, we spend days upon days doing cosplay or dressing up to go to a horror con to meet some of the people that have influenced our life. You don't get rom-com con. You don't get people dressing up like Ryan Gosling and Rachel McAdams from The Notebook and spinning each other in a gymnasium. Like, you don't get that.
No,
but you get horror con because we love the genre and each other that much. Now, I want to build a little more onto the horror macaroni. We're getting from Lisa to that.
Yes.
You do love spending your time traveling, watching, talking, and collecting all things horror. VHS and vinyl are your two loves. And what I love about this, I don't know if you know this about me. I grew up in a video store. My mom and dad owned like a mom and pop video store called Downtown Video. And yeah, so like VHS, that's like the way to my heart. And vinyl records, like I have some of my favorite, soundtracks. Like I have the Evil Dead 2 vinyl. Like these are things that I think that there's a deep appreciation for that era now because it's real. There's not that digital, which is nothing wrong with that. If you're into whatever is going on today, that's your thing. I appreciate and I love everything, but there's just something about hearing that record or hearing that tape slowing down and it's about to click that it's back at the beginning of the VHS. Like these little things, hitting the channel button to adjust the tracking, these things that we love so much. What started you wanting to become a collector of VHS and vinyl records?
Oh my gosh, such an excellent question. I love talking about this so much too. So to start, like when my love of horror really started, I was young, like most everybody. And and actually it's so funny you just said that because my VCR just clicked because I had a South Park VHS. And so right when you said it clicked. And now I have
real quick. Is it one of the South Park VHSs where you have Matt and Trey talking before each episode?
Yes. And this one was, and this one was about when Big Gay Al.
Yes, the boat ride.
Yes. So I was just watching that as I was kind of typing up a couple of things about to me. And so when you just said that, it was just like perfect timing. But yes, my love for VHS really, it's so funny because when I was younger, and we'll kind of get into this too, I hope I'm not jumping the gun too much, but when I was younger, my mom would take me to the library all the time. And so at the end of our library trip, I would always rent a VHS.
Mhm.
And that kind of boiled down to about 3 VHS, which I know we'll get into.
Yeah.
And so from there, we would always like tape things off of like, HBO, because HBO was on channel 6 at the time. Like this is
Mhm.
like dating myself. But like, so VHS. So back in 2020, I moved up from when 2020 was going into 2021, I moved from Florida to Michigan. And what a difference, first and foremost. But also, I got introduced to a couple cool people in the area, one being Jerry from Jack's Record Stash down in Flint. So
Mhm.
I had just explained to him my love for horror, and he was like, "Oh my God, like I have this copy of The Thing on VHS. Do you want it?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, totally. I'll take it. Like, why not? I have a
Does a bear shit
VCR."
in the woods? Yeah, I'll take
Yeah,
it.
of course. Like, I would totally take that. Yes. And like, I was like, "Okay, yeah, sure. We have a VCR. Like, we never watch anything on it." And then it blew up. I was like, this is what I need. And then my hunt for VHS just expanded.
Mhm.
And kind of like along the same realm, I started getting into vinyl a lot more. First, I started collecting a lot of the Deftones and System of a Down, stuff like that. My love for new metal. I think that kind of has an overlap. But I started going towards the soundtracks, and I was like, I really love Suspiria. Maybe I'll buy the Suspiria soundtrack. And
Yeah.
that was like one of the first I got, and it was just like, yes, I forgot how much I love music, just
Mhm.
music. So I was like, okay. And then, uh, my wallet was just like, why? But my heart was like, oh, everything horror, yes.
Right. Well, and what I love about this is the fact that you went from Florida to Michigan because go Tigers. Um,
Oh my God, I was just watching we were just watching the Lions game. It's so funny.
go Lions. I can't believe they pulled that off.
I
Um,
know. I was like, we were both like me and my partner were both like, what?
I know. Trust me. I'm still here in Michigan too. So much love, Michiganders. Love it.
Yes.
Midwest. Yeah, Michigan, the only place to be like, where do you live? I'm right here. Um,
Yes. Oh my God. It's so funny that you say that because like when I first moved up here, everybody would do that. And I'm like, why does everybody keep doing this? And then I was like, well, duh. Like, because then now I catch myself doing it. I'm like, this is where I am. Oh no.
I've become
No.
one of them. Now I need Verners and cherries from Traverse City. Oh no, I'm one of them.
I just want to like open my cabinets and all the cherries fall out. And I'm like, oh my God, it's not me.
Dude, it's so funny because if you're not from Michigan, guys, I got to throw this little disclaimer in there. Traverse City has a big cherry festival every year when the cherries bloom, and oh my god, it is the best cherries you could ever
Yes.
hope to have ever. So like people are like, what the fuck are they talking about with Verners and
I
cherries? Like,
know.
oh god, come to Michigan. We will welcome you with open arms. Please come and visit me.
Oh my
Um,
gosh. And it's so funny because like it's such a culture shock because like and not to get too much on a tangent, but like I went from like New York to Florida to Tennessee to Pennsylvania to New York to blah 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 blah. Blah. And now I'm in Michigan and I'm like, oh my gosh, so different. But then I'm also like, okay, I get why people like this.
see, it's funny because like I live in a suburb, and some people around here call this the city, and I'm like, oh guys, this is not the city. Like this is seriously not the city at all. Like go to Chicago, go to Detroit, go to LA, and then come back here and talk to me about the city life.
Oh my gosh. And that's like as a therapist, like because I am a therapist in my like everyday life. And sometimes, I just want to tell people like go live in LA for a couple of weeks and then tell me about anxiety because oh my God.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
totally understand. Like every time I have to go to Chicago or LA or New York, I'm like, no, I gotta drive. I hate driving in those towns.
So we're actually going to Chicago next week to go see Suede in concert, which we're both like super pumped for. Yes. And we're driving. So usually we take the train. And this is the first time we're driving. And I was just explaining to somebody how, you know, I've driven in New York, I've driven in LA, Tampa, a little bit of everywhere. Even, I mean, I've been in a car in Spain, in Mexico. There's nothing like Chicago.
It's
Nothing,
insane.
nothing.
Insane. Listen,
Couldn't
all my
believe it.
Chicagoans, you know I love you. I love going to your city. I've always been treated with the biggest amount of respect in your town. But fuck, you guys do not know how to drive and you do not know how to be a pedestrian. I
Oh
love
my
you,
God.
but you just don't know
Yeah.
how to do it. I'm
Love
sorry.
your city, hate your driving. Scares me.
Right. Um, one thing I do want to touch on real quick before we get into why we're here. Another thing I want to talk about that I'm super stoked about: Horror Macaroni the zine. You know, your magazine available. You could get it online and at random book record and stores throughout the U.S. and maybe a couple in Spain as well.
Yes.
But the easiest way to do it, there are some links down here in the description that you can click not only to buy the zine, but to also follow Horror Macaroni and stay up to date with Lisa and everything that she's doing. So make sure you guys are clicking these links in the description. Check out Horror Macaroni. Now I need to know, what gave you the push to actually start the zine?
So I have to go ahead and admit it was 100% my partner pushing me for it. And he's
Well, thank you to your partner.
yes, and you know, honestly, he's always been such a huge inspiration. Like he's put his own zines out. He's done comedy, and when I started talking a lot more about horror, he's really one who pushed me to write about it. And when we were kind of playing with the idea one day, in fact, it was funny because we were driving in the car. And I remember I was like, well, maybe I'll just like do a zine or something. I can just like write about horror and all my love for horror. And he was just like, yes, you will do that.
That's so
And so
cool.
he gave me that huge push to do it. And so the first one turned out amazing. And we got into all these different record stores, just by trade and all that. But my biggest accomplishment, I have to brag about it, speaking of Chicago, because Quimby's, let's say, I mean, I was so excited to be like, found a zine store, put my zine in it. But it was really my partner really pushed me and just really wanting me to share my love for horror, because my love for horror is from movies to true crime and everything in between. So
Yeah.
he was really that big push, like talk about all of it.
Well, when you have a partner that is so supportive of the things that you do, um, it makes your life so much easier. And
Yes.
like, people that watch the channel, you know Ashley, and you know how special she is, and you know she does the lives and didn't see that coming in verses. And I've had the argument with people of you know, your wife being a part of your channel, and I'm like, listen, I told her that the only way I would ever do those, because she came up with the ideas for didn't see that coming in verses, like the segments that we do.
Oh,
And I
that's so
told her,
cool.
the only way that I will do this is if you do it with me. I forced her into it because you know, we've been together 17 years. Our first date was to go see Tom Cruise's War of the Worlds. Like, we
That's so
started
cool.
our relationship with horror, and I wanted her to be a part of this. And she's the best part of it, if you ask me. So I'm really glad you have a partner that is on your team, that he has your back, and he's willing to sometimes push you a little harder maybe than he has to, but it's, you know, for the right reason. So
Oh,
tell him I said, thank you so much.
I absolutely will. And just like give a little bit more, because like we run a VHS night every month in our town, in our small town in Michigan. And he actually was the one who pushed me to do that as well, like really advertise it. We've had such a huge community support for it that we even got like genre films to support us. So we are able to show movies like Miami Connection, which is
Right.
happening next Saturday here in Mount Pleasant. So super excited about that. But again,
Shoot me
yes.
the info. Me and Ashley would gladly come and hang out for a night.
Oh, absolutely. I'll shoot it over to you because it's, I mean, let's face it, like Miami Connection has a special place in my heart. But
Right.
yes, absolutely. It's
Yeah,
always
we'd
so
love.
great to have a partner that's like just in it.
Oh, we'd love to be a part of it. I would love to come out there and hang out for a night.
Yeah, totally.
Well, I mean, now you guys know where you can find Horror Macaroni. You got all the links down here in the description. But here's the rub: if you're going to write a horror zine, or you're going to, you know, host VHS nights, and you're going to do all that, horror has to start for you somehow. So now, Lisa, I would like to go back to the past and talk about what got you started in the horror genre, your first horror movie. And in this time, we're going to pluralize it. So your first horror movies were
Beetlejuice, The Addams Family and the Addams Family Values.
That is quite the trifecta there, because to me, those are absolutely gateway horror movies. Like, if you're going to show somebody a horror movie for the first time and you want to see how they're going to do with it, I always recommend Beetlejuice. The Gate is a big one that I always say is a good one. And Ghostbusters are the three those are always the three that I recommend. I think that those are definitely, while they're horror comedy, they're definitely horror rooted. So, do you remember about how old you were the first time you had seen these?
So it's so funny. So I'll just kind of give a tiny back of it. So since I think one of my earliest memories was of A Nightmare Before Christmas. So I always had that kind of connection. So I had to be around 5 or 6. The first time I remember seeing Beetlejuice, my first time.
Yeah.
And rented it from the library. Remember just eyes this big, just staring at the screen and just being like, and in love, just like in love, and not even knowing what that felt like at 5, and just being like, I want to watch this again and again and again.
And it's one of those movies that has stood the test of time.
Yes.
You watch that movie even to this day, and God, it's such a great movie with such an iconic villain that's only in the movie for what, 8 minutes, 9 minutes total. You get to see him, but every time he's there, he's stealing the scene because Michael Keaton is just a goddamn genius.
Oh my God, yes, through and through. And he brought the energy, like that's the thing too. He brings such an energy to the screen that like you're paying attention. Like, and that was such an important part of it, is that he is, when you're introduced to him, you just want to see what he's going to do, because he is just a menace.
Yeah. Well, and the big thing about Beetlejuice is it's one of those movies that was so controversial at the time because it was aimed at kids, but it's all, nice fucking model, honk, honk. Nice fucking model. Like there's so many things in this movie that are very, very adult oriented. So do you remember who it was that you watched Beetlejuice with for the first time?
It was my mother. And what's funny is my mom, I always laugh because I blame her in the best way possible, that started my love for all things horror.
Love you, Mom.
Yes, like, and she knows it because I tell her that all the time, and she laughs at it because she was the first one who showed me The Shining. She was the first one who showed me Beetlejuice. She was the first one. I grew up in Massapequa, New York, on Long Island, and Massapequa is right next door to Amityville. And my mom took me to the Amityville Horror House when I was 7. And so these are things that I just, like, she always had this like link. So we watched Beetlejuice when I rented it from the library. She sat down with me and watched it. And she was cracking. I remember her cracking up behind me on the couch. We had this like black leather couch. I was sitting on the rug and I'm watching it just like, and she's cracking up behind me. And I'm like, what? Just not getting everything, but just loving what I'm seeing in front of me.
Yeah. And it's a movie that is so infectious because it has the comedy, it has the horror, it has one of the best musical numbers of all time in any movie ever. And the acting is just flat out ridiculous. Like, there's so many different people that steal the scenes in this movie. So, do you remember which scene it was that affected you the most?
So there's two for sure. And so the first one is very just subtle. It's just the introduction to Lydia Deetz. Being just a young girl and just loving horror, but not really knowing what horror is at that time. You like spooky stuff. I loved ghost stories. I actually even have In a Dark, Dark Room right there on my table because it was like the first book I ever owned as a kid, and it was a scary story. And just like not knowing. And then you see this girl who not only is describing herself as weird and unusual, like strange and unusual, but is like not fazed by the paranormal. In fact, like embraces it. And I was like, I will be her. I will be this woman. Like, it just like, I'm in love with this girl. And she, you connecting. But the really like the biggest scene for me, and I think this kind of goes without saying, is the transformation scene. You have Juno challenging both Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis to be scary, and you have this like music that's playing that has that like that hard like much
Mhm.
like Nightmare Before Christmas, and you have Alec Baldwin like concentrating, and then almost like your first introduction to body horror.
Yeah.
Like he's pulling his face, he's doing all out, and he when he that noise when he reaches in and pulls all the eyeballs, you just hear that clacking noise. I just remember just the sounds, this like everything going on. And then Gina Davis, who I love Gina Davis still to this day. Like I love her. And seeing her just like pull her face, flick her eyes, I was like,
Yeah.
this is like, it blew my mind. Because before that, Nightmare Before Christmas to me was like my introduction, like that and The Crow, which is kind of a weird tie-in. But Nightmare Before Christmas to me, I was like, I loved it. But that was claymation.
Mhm.
And now you have claymation with people, and you're like, how do they do that?
Yeah. So, and this is a scene that I think, real, like you said, it's for a younger child. This is your introduction into body horror,
Yes.
which is an amazing, and the way that they do it in this film is amazing. It's so good.
Oh yeah.
So we know which scenes it was that affected you the most, but what would you say your favorite scene is?
So I was thinking about this too, because I feel like my favorite scene, I mean, I think, the dance scene at the table is iconic, but I think that one part in particular is when Beetlejuice comes up as the snake of the armrest of the stairs. Because one, I'm terrified of snakes. And two, the way that he looked was so menacing and so terrifying. It
Yeah.
was just like, and I think plus the way that he kind of like hovers over and just like that angle of the camera, and like even not knowing it and recently rewatching it, I love the way the camera angles make you feel like a kid at
Hmm.
times. It makes you feel like you're a kid there,
Yeah.
and it's terrifying.
It really is. And it's funny how a movie can transport us back to being that little kid sitting on the floor watching it. I love how movies have that ability. Um, so obviously right now in Hollywood, sequels, requels, remakes are all the rage. And we've been hearing we're going to get a Beetlejuice sequel for 20 years now, but would you like to see a Beetlejuice sequel or Beetlejuice remade today?
Oh my gosh, see, and this is so hard because you know I have to go on a little bit of a soapbox because I like to refer as the remakes and sequels and prequels and everything as like young horror,
Mhm.
because I do think that they have a great way of reaching a younger audience. I think they just do it in their own way. What scares me a little bit is I don't want, oh, forgive me for saying this, is I don't want another Hocus Pocus 2, because even though I get the love, I mean, Hocus Pocus, come on, is beloved in our lives, right? But the second one to me, and this is just a personal opinion, is like you had to see the first one to see the second one.
Right.
Like they made so many references. So as long as they didn't make it like that and kept it even just its own brand new story, I would love to see something like that. Great, use the lore. Like the
Mhm.
Beetlejuice lore is so cool. Like the cartoon for Beetlejuice, like was awesome. And that's kind of like the tie-in, because as much as I love the movie, the cartoon too, I just remember watching it all the time.
Yeah.
And just like that red, like poncho that Lydia Dietz had. I didn't want my grandmother to try to make one for me. I wanted one so bad. Yes.
That's
But
so awesome.
as long as it kept it like its own thing, yes, bring us like your own version of it. I want to see what you can do with it. You don't need the old story.
I've always said that the best sequel of all time is Doctor Sleep, the sequel to The Shining. I think that's the best sequel of all time because it's its own story, and you don't have to watch The Shining to understand it. And you really don't even get any Shining references until the third act when they get to the Overlook. So I agree with you. I think if you're going to do something, do it like that. Make it its own story. Have some, maybe some Easter eggs here and there, some backstory here and there, but don't make it just an off section of the first one. Make it your own film and, pay homage to the first one. Don't completely bite off it.
Totally agree. Totally agree. And there's so many cool and creative minds nowadays. And like, that's something to like appreciate too. Like, we know John Carpenter, we know all these people from our horror movie history, but we do have these new faces of horror and these new visions. I mean, I would say this is kind of like an in-between, but even Ari Aster, like what he brings to horror is a different perspective. And like you have these new visions. I mean, Jordan Peele, he brings a new vision to it. Let these people use their vision for it. So yes,
I'm a huge Mike Flanagan guy too. Like I think Flanagan
is yes.
We're living in the golden age of horror directors, in my opinion, right now. Like in 30, 40 years, they're going to look back and be like, man, like how we look back and think about Craven and Carpenter. And like, that's how they're going to look back. Like, man, Peele, Flanagan, like that's Ari Aster.
Yes,
oh my
absolutely. Gosh. And, and the cool thing is, because not only like, obviously we have CGI, we have all that, we know about practical effects, but honestly, even like, because of like this like renaissance of practical effects that has slowly been coming up, we do have these new technology like behind like practical effects that, I mean, Tom Savini is proud of, I'm sure. But you have this, like, use it. Because even like the new Hellraiser, I thought it was great, it kept my attention. But when I think Hellraiser, I think gore. Like I kind of went in preparing for gore. And then I was like kind of surprised, like that it especially because of all the memes that it had.
I'm not a huge fan of it. I mean, like, I loved Jamie Clayton, and I could use another film with her. But
yes,
my big thing is like, it's better than probably the last 6 or 7 of the other Hellraisers. But I was so amped with what they could have done with the gore and what they could have done with the BDSM stuff that they always had in the first 2. I didn't get a lot of that. And I'm not an overly sexual person when it comes to film, but that's what that movie is. It's a sexualized film. That's what it's supposed to be. So it's kind of a bummer that we didn't get to see any of that. But I've always thought of CGI, especially in horror films, as the salt and pepper to your mashed potatoes. The mashed potatoes being your practical effects. You want your full serving of mashed potatoes, but sometimes you got to spice it up a little bit. And that's where your salt and pepper comes in. And that to me is CGI. If you want to sprinkle it in here and there to make a practical effect look better, be my guest. But when you do over CGI, it ruins a film, in my opinion. So
yes, there's a great blend of the two. Right.
Yes. So Lisa, we know how horror started for you, but now my buddy Ghostface, he's usually here, but for this video and my last video, he's out shooting Scream 6, so I couldn't have him here with me today. The action figure I usually use has his head broken off because of my daughter. So it's going to be me asking you the question again today. What's your favorite scary movie, Lisa?
I was going to say, so I can use my, I have a ghost face right there.
That's who asked. There we go.
There we go. So, favorite scary movie?
Yes. Your absolute favorite horror movie of all time.
See, and this is such a hard one because I do get this question often, like, and I think that I have to go with a movie that's like, and this is a weird thing to say, but like equal parts comforting, as well as having a huge crush on one of the main actors, and thinking that it's like cannot be topped is The Thing.
Sure. We were just talking about practical effects. If somebody asked me like my favorite practical effect movies, the OG Nightmare on Elm Street, American Werewolf in London, and the Thing. Those 3 movies to me will never be topped for their practical effects. And where The Thing I think is actually underrated, I think The Thing may have my top 3 favorite score as well. You can't touch the score for The Thing, and it's so amazing, and the practical effects are great. Kurt Russell's fantastic in that movie. You got Wilford Brimley, pre-diabetes commercials. Like, you've got so many amazing things in that movie. And we want to talk, I was just going to say, when you talk about CGI ruining Look at the Thing prequel that came out in 2011. The CGI completely killed that movie. You took one of the best practical effect movies of all time and you ruined it with CGI. And you get it with all three aspects: the Thing prequel, the American Werewolf sequel, and American Werewolf in Paris had CGI that was dog shit,
Oh my
and
God.
the Nightmare on Elm Street remake had
Yes.
dog shit CGI. So
Yeah.
when you take these movies that, in my opinion, are amazing practical effect movies, and Nightmare on Elm Street was so much about their practical effects.
Oh my God.
Freddy
Yes.
Krueger himself is only on screen for like 6 or 7 minutes
Yes.
because they couldn't do the makeup the same all the time. So they had to, do him invisible, dragging her up the wall, or what have you. And to me, I would rather see that and have to use my imagination than see that shitty CGI Freddy coming in the wall. Like, it just looks bad.
I'd rather, yes, you want to see the effort put into it, and you're 100% right. Like, with the Thing, because not only does it hit like the practical effects, like just peak like from having actors. I mean, even just having the armless actor when that scene with the chest. And actually, it's funny because when we first started talking about this, I thought about that scene immediately, but because it affected me so much. But I was like, but it wasn't one of the first ones.
Sure.
But it's definitely still one I'm like, I love this scene so much. And it's so weird. But at the same time, I agree with you 100%. Those three movies, American Werewolf in London is probably like The Thing and American Werewolf in London are like top. Probably they compete every other day of each other. You caught me on the Thing day.
Right. Well, American Werewolf, I think, is not only one of the best practical effect movies, but it's one of the best love stories of all time. And
Yes.
because it has a dual love story, you have the relationship between David and Nurse Alex, but you also have the love relationship between David and Jack,
Yes, and that's something that I think that completely falls under the radar with that movie is that love story that comes up. Like the when we think of love stories, we always think of like more heterosexual relationship, but we love people who are our best friends, who are our family. Like, what happens if they are the person who's haunting us? This is trauma we're seeing. And like, again, as a therapist, I'm like, oh, this is a trauma reaction. But horror movie, I'm also like, oh my God, the practical effects that Jack has. I mean,
one of my favorite things about that movie, and nobody talks about it enough, is how every time we see Jack, he's deteriorated more and more and more. So it's almost like, is he a part of David's mind, where his mind is deteriorating more and more? That's where Jack is deteriorating more. He's not your typical ghost. He's not a zombie either, but he's almost a mix of both, where he is decomposing and deteriorating, and that is just fucking genius to me. And every time you see him, he's gone more and more off the edge. It's beautiful storytelling.
I think that's a way of showing too that like time, that I think that's something we get lost with movies, is like the concept of time. And I understand why. We all understand why. But American Werewolf in London showed time passing. We see deterioration. We see it in exactly his mind. We see these fever dreams happen.
Yeah.
And this is things that happen when we start losing our mind. We start losing lack of sleep. We start having these very like grandiose like dreams, and it's so brilliantly told, because it's not just like, here you go, here's all the information. We're hit with it and we are watching it happen.
And it's at the same time, it's a horror movie first. And that's what I love about horror. They've always had their underlying messages about race, gender, anxiety, but they've all, you can make a great movie like that and be a horror movie first. So,
absolutely.
I do want to remind everybody that all of Horror Macaroni, all of Lisa's social media links, all the links to the zine, everything is down here in the description. So make sure you guys are clicking those. Now, before I let you go, what we're going to do real quick, I always ask one last question. We're going to bounce back to Beetlejuice. And what we're going to do here is we're going to rank Beetlejuice on a skull count. Now, we're not ranking it on acting, production, score, nothing like that. What we're doing here is strictly ranking Beetlejuice on how much it affected you on your first viewing. So 0 skulls being not effective, 5 being extremely effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle. Elisa, what would your ranking of Beetlejuice be?
Oh my gosh, I think a solid 4.5.
Well, I mean, if it
Solid
affected you
4.5.
so much that it's continued to, be with you still today. I've said there's never a perfect horror movie. There's one perfect movie that's ever been made, in my opinion, and that's Pee-wee's Big Adventure. That movie is fucking flawless. It's perfect.
Love that movie so
Yes.
much.
But when it comes to horror, I've never given anything a perfect rating. Psycho was really close, but I hate the ending. I don't think that Norman Bates would be taken down by lifting his arm up and falling. That to me is just ridiculous. And then Nightmare on Elm Street, I think that that's a perfect horror movie until you get to the fucking dumb Freddy car and the mom going through the window. It's ridiculous. But there are plenty of movies that have affected me up to a 5 skull, to where House 1986 is the first horror movie I ever watched. And that movie is so good. I love that movie so much. And that's a 5 skull for me, because I wouldn't be the guy I am right now were it not for that movie. So I do want to again say thank you so much for coming on and being a part of this with me. I'm so glad that we could finally make this happen, and I cannot wait to shake your hand in person and hang out for a VHS night. So
Yes,
Lisa,
please come. And also, just a heads up, like I did
yeah,
get a House and House 2 double vinyl recently. I think I posted it recently, and I love those movies. I just, yeah, those are awesome, like first movies.
yes, yes. The first one I ever watched was House, and like still to this day, I got the House poster up in my room with the "Ding Dong, You're Dead." Like that's my shit.
Love
So
that.
um, don't go anywhere, Lisa. Yeah, I do have a couple more questions for you.
Yes.
Everybody else, as always, keep talking horror, stay who you are, and we'll see you guys soon.